The following program is sponsored by Friends of Life Outreach International. Coming up, after overcoming many challenges in her life, Lisa Osteen Comes, the sister of Pastor Joel Osteen, was nearly killed when a mail bomb exploded in her lap.
When I picked up this one box, it was heavy, and I didn't know what it was. Put it in my lap, sort of like a shoebox, sideways. And when I lifted the last piece of tape on that, it just exploded in my lap.
Her inspiring story of hope and optimism. Next.
It's such a joy to be with you and to come in your home. I'm James Robison. Betty and I feel blessed to be with you and to have wonderful guests. I mean, I think most of you have kind of enjoyed watching a real phenomenon in our day, and that's the ministry that God raised up. And it's such a God thing, and nobody knows it any better than Joel does, but Joel Osteen's ministry, it's really a supernatural miracle of God's grace and the love and the encouragement that comes from him. I'm smiling now just thinking about him smiling. You can't hardly say Joel or think about Joel and not smile. I think Joel might smile when he cries. But there's a real joy there that we desperately need, that only God can give us in these challenging times. And he and Victoria are blessing. But see, I've known John and Dodie back when John was leading Lakewood. That's Joel's pastor, if you don't know. And Dodie's just such a beautiful, beautiful person. And what a pastor's wife, and what a church leader, and what an example of the grace and mighty healing power of God. But this whole family is wonderful, and we've got a guest. You talk about beautiful. And I'm telling you what, Joel, I'm sorry, but you got shortchanged right here. This is Lisa Osteen Comes, and she is absolutely a beautiful person. Now, we could have lost her because a mail bomb was delivered, that she just happened to be the one to get out of the mailbox. And this is the story that she waited a long time to write. The title, You Are Made for More. Made for More. All of the people who have endorsed this and been blessed by it, from Joyce Meyer to Bishop T.D. Jakes and of all people, Donald Trump. You know, you say, well, why would he endorse it? Because, listen, people are searching. They're searching for something more. And I believe that Lisa's going to talk about that explosion, but she's going to talk about the lessons she learned that perhaps were far more important even than any that she learned then. Would you welcome Lisa Osteen to
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
And your name is Comas. I'm getting a little...
Comas? That's
the last
okay.
name is Comas.
It's
I bet
Comas.
It's misspelled. Mine, I mean, mispronounced.
It is a lot, but I don't care.
Well,
just call me Lisa.
I'm Robinson and Robison. And
That's right.
Tell us about why you finally wrote the book. I mean, I'm really interested because you waited quite a while.
I did.
The explosion, how many years back?
That was 21 years ago. And I wanted to write it, and I kept thinking now is the time, and it wasn't. And the last time I really asked the Lord, when do you want me to write this book? He said, I have one more chapter for you to write. And I just waited, and I didn't know what he meant by that, but within the next 2 years, I went through some things, and I was able to know what that chapter was, and it was the book on what to do when you fail. Because there's so many believers that fall in life. They sin, they're addicted to different habits, and they don't know how to get out. And they're ashamed. You know, they feel guilty, they feel condemned, and the last thing they want to do is go back to the church and say, look, I'm struggling with this. But you know, you're all about this, James and Betty, and I am too, that the church is not a museum to display perfect people, but it's a hospital for the hurting.
Yes,
and we need to know that when we fall, you know, that Jesus is right there for us, and that we can be restored, and we can recover, and we can move on forward into our destiny. And I think also that we as believers need to get more mature in this area, and we need to reach out to the fallen in a different way. Not, you know, I think sometimes we have this religious attitude where we want to judge, we want to condemn, and we want to throw stones, and we want to gossip. But the truth is, if we want to be like Jesus, we need to reach out, just like Jesus did, lift the fallen, encourage them, love them, and say, what can I do to help you get back on your feet? And think about this, sometimes we're so easy to forgive the sinner. They may have done terrible things, but they come to the Lord and, it's all past. But then a believer falls and does something, we just want to throw stones at them.
Well, we do.
And I think that we
kick
have
the dirt in on them while they're in the pit. And really, this is really a shame, because when a person fails, they feel ashamed. You say, well, they should. They should. See, I got that religious one. Well, they should. Shame on you. But God is saying, I took the shame.
Yes.
Jesus, for the joy, endured. He could see the joy of what grace will do. He endured the cross.
That's right.
Because he could see what the application of that grace does. I think it was very important, especially in this day and time, that you waited to write that chapter. And I think really the beautiful thing is, Lisa, I don't think it was written so much because of your failure. I think you could say, I got plenty, and I would want to be able to tell you and you not make me feel bad if I told you. That's what I'd like. But I really believe you looked out and you were waiting on God, and you said you saw all these people hurting.
Yeah.
And you saw how desperately they need our help.
Well,
thank you for writing.
Yeah, well, thank you. As one of the pastors at Lakewood, you just deal with these broken-hearted people. And they need someone to reach out to them. They've been burned, at different places, different believers. And you know what? They just need to know they can come to the church and get healing.
And I think we see that when we look at the congregation. I look at Joel and Victoria, and they're both just radiantly attractive. You are radiantly attractive.
Oh, thank
you. But let me tell you what really blesses me? I love the way the church is lit. I actually told some of the technicians, you've lit it just beautifully. You've been very, very effective. But what I love is when I see the faces. I see hungry people.
Yes.
I see appreciative people. I see radiant people. I see people that were probably broken, and now they've been put back together. I want you to tell us about the experience, though, that you kind of held back talking about when you went out to the mailbox. Tell us about that day that really set up really the journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
And what happened.
Well, it was on January 30th, 1990, and I opened my parents' personal mail for them all the time. And I received this box this one day, went into the office about 10. But what's interesting, before I went into the office that day, I had on a little cotton skirt. But as I touched the door, going out the door, something just said, change. And I thought, I don't like what I have on. And I went and changed and put on a leather outfit. It was in back then, But anyway, when I picked up this one box, it was heavy. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't suspect anything wrong. And finally I did this and put it in my lap, sort of like a shoebox, sideways. And when I lifted the last piece of tape on that, it just exploded in my lap. And that was the last thing I could remember for a few seconds. I was sitting, and then the next thing I knew, I was standing and I was shaking like I had been electrocuted. And I talked to the Lord. I said, Lord, am I dying? Is this death? And as soon as I said that, I came to my senses and I looked down. I didn't even know how I got out of my chair, and my clothes were smoldering. And I ran out of the room and I asked for help, and I said, a bomb has exploded in my lap. And of course, they took care of me. They took care of me, got me to the hospital. I did have surgery. I was in the hospital for 13 days because I had a hole in my leg and holes in my abdomen. The miracle is the way I held that, those 10-inch nails, that shrapnel just shredded my desk and the wall. It could have shredded my body. The paramedic on duty.
It could have penetrated every vital organ.
Yeah.
Had it just been turned slightly, and the leather
That's
dress
exactly right.
had something to do with protecting you.
It sure did. And the paramedics told my dad, somebody had to be standing between you and your daughter because there's no way she could have escaped that.
Wow.
And so God did such a great miracle for me. And it, went all over the Houston and all over headline news.
Well, it did, and we prayed for you. We were shocked, and I think all of us in ministry probably kind of went on guard, wondering what's coming. Who is it that's angry at somebody in the church? All right, you're made for more. What does that mean to you? You're made for more.
I believe that God made us on purpose and for a purpose, and He has a destiny for us to fulfill. And the Bible says that when we were in our mother's womb, He formed us, and every day written for us, we're written in His book. And so God has a book written about us. We have a purpose and a destiny, and these trials come into our life, and sometimes they stop us. Just in our tracks, we get stuck in an event. And
you can get stuck at almost an age in your life.
Yes.
And eventually certain things happen. It's almost like people can't get out of that particular place.
That's so true. But you know what? God made us for more than just being stuck. He made us to fulfill our destiny. He has more to do inside of us, and He has more for us to offer to people around us, because He not only wants us to get through, He wants us to turn around and be a blessing to other people.
You know, one of the things that I think many people might be surprised about, but you share it quite openly in the book. And by the way, this is it's a treasure. One of the things that you share, many people have experienced. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And a lot of people wouldn't know that.
Well, I know, and you know, I say often that this was a literal bomb in my life, but people have bombs going off in their life all the time. A divorce, loss of a loved one, you know, losing a child, and so there are bombs in our life that we all have to deal with. And when I was in my early 20s, you know, I married a minister, thought I'd be married forever, and just excited about ministry. But, you know, he sort of deceived me. He sent me home, and he sent me divorce papers in the mail. And it really devastated me. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I had a wonderful wedding and had to go back home defeated, live in my old childhood bedroom. But, you know, I found out during that time, after I lived in self-pity for a few weeks and cried my eyes out, I realized that, you know what, it wasn't worth living in self-pity. And that just because I had gone through this tragic event didn't mean that my life was over. And that I just had to realize that God still had a plan for me. And you know, in those few weeks, I thought, you know, my life is over. It looks hopeless. I'll never get into the perfect will of God. But you know what? That's just hopeless thinking from Satan, our enemy.
Yeah, none of that's true.
The fact is that God still has a plan.
Absolutely.
And He knows how to get you through that tragedy, and He can heal you. He healed my broken heart. I mean, that scripture became so real. I cried out to God and I said, God, I want to go forward, but how do I go forward when I'm full of hurt? But your word says you heal the brokenhearted and you bind up our wounds. And I said, God, I gotta have you do that for me. And the night I prayed that, nothing really happened. But the next morning when I got up and I walked outside, I'll never forget it. It's like God just touched me. And all of a sudden I felt His presence, and that heaviness and that oppression lifted off of me. And He literally healed my broken heart. It's like He did surgery in me. And there was a change, there was a difference. And I went on with my life, and I began to read.
If somebody watching right now, Lisa, says, okay, what exactly